Hi, everyone. My name is Essen, and you are listening to the Brown History Podcast. Today, we have the pleasure of welcoming Fatima Farheen Mirza. Fatima is the acclaimed author of the novel A Place for Us, which offers a profound and deeply insightful look into the lives of an Indian American Muslim family navigating their cultural and personal identities in modern day America. Her debut work has received praise for its richly drawn characters and its ability to capture the intricacies of family dynamics and the immigrant experience. I would add that she also excels at uncovering the heart, pain, and struggles inherent in the everyday moments of family life. In the latest episode, we sit down with Fatima Farheen Mirza and dive into her creative process, the themes she explores in her work, and her journey as a writer. In addition to her novel, Fatima also shares her thoughts and reflections through her newsletter, which if you ever want to look into the brain of a successful writer, the process, their favorite books, what they do to get the work done, everything, check out our newsletter. It's fatimafarheenmirza.substack.com. It's a really great episode. I can't wait for you guys to hear it. Also, if you're enjoying Brown History and you're enjoying the podcast and you want to support and you want to help out, do consider being a patron. Your help, your contribution goes a long way. It keeps us afloat. Thank you so much for listening, and let's get this started. Here we go. Hi, Fatima. Nice to meet you. Thank you for coming on. And I think I should congratulate you because now you're a mom.
Oh,
So
thanks so much.
congratulations.
Thank you.
How exhausted are you?
I'm so tired. Yeah, I mean that's why I have this coffee here. I don't know how articulate I'm gonna be until it kicks in.
I have an 18-month-old son right now, and I'm so tired. I think I've
Oh my
aged like
God.
10 years. Is exhausted. It doesn't get easier.
Congratulations. That's so exciting.
And I was gonna ask this question later, but has, a baby and success
Hmm.
impacted you in a, I guess not a negative way, but has it been more difficult to write?
Oh wow, that's interesting. Um,
I mean, the baby's a given, but with fame and success and a fan base now, it must be hard to like, there's the pressure, you're
oh,
distracted, you're invited to places more.
yeah, that's a great question. You know, Alexander Chi had written something once that I really loved. And I'm gonna completely butcher it.
Hmm.
So maybe I'll, after this, I can find the actual quote and send it to you. But it was something like, when you're working on your first book, it's the experience of it is like you're working in a room where the door is closed. And after that first book comes out, you can go back to work, but that door is always open, that sense of privacy.
Yeah.
Um, so that's something that I guess miss about when I was working on my first novel. This feeling of creating something in private and creating something where you don't know if it's going to be anything, what's going to happen with it. But in many ways, actually, the experience of the second novel is like that. I really thought that, okay, the first novel is teaching you how to write, and you do it, and you learn how to write, and that's why it takes so long.
Hmm.
Um, and then after that, it'll be easy. It's kind of, I mean, I didn't think that, but I thought it would maybe be easier. And what I'm finding now is that each novel has to teach you how to work how to work on it in particular, you know.
Okay.
So it's just as much of a kind of
Leap of
puzzle,
faith.
Yeah, a leap of faith, just as much as a puzzle. Um,
But you must have some confidence in you now because like you did it. You've done it
mhm,
and it's in you kinda, and now it's
mhm,
easier to do it, I guess. I guess you have more trust in yourself, or is that still a
mhm.
bit iffy?
No, yes, I do have maybe more trust in myself, but like I said, when you're creating something from scratch, there's still so many unknowns.
Hmm.
There's so many problems that are really good problems to have. Like that's the experience of writing is like sitting down and figuring out like, wait, I know where my character starts, but how do they get here? And how do they all of this stuff? So it's still that kind of unknown is really exciting. It's built into the process, right?
Right.
Um, but maybe the thing that is really helpful is that with my first book, it's like I know how long it takes. So I know to wait, if that makes sense.
You're more patient.
Yeah, maybe I'm more patient.
You
Maybe I'm
trust the process.
yes, I trust that this is the unknown part that I'm in right now. And I also know that I like that part more if that makes sense. Like sometimes when it's like it's harder, it's so hard. And I kind of describe it like when you're really young, and you don't know what your life is going to be like. You don't know who you're going to be with. You don't know where you're going to live. You don't know what job it's going to be, what your
Right.
job's going to be. Maybe you don't even know what major you're going to study in college or something. And
Yeah.
it's so uncomfortable to be young sometimes. And then when you look back, you're also like, well, that was so freeing, right? And so I kind of feel like that. I'm in that uncomfortable stage of the novel where I'm like, I don't know if it's is actually one book or two. I don't know if it's maybe a book at all. I don't know if it's going to be, told in multiple perspectives or just one. So you're kind of figuring out all of this stuff. And what I'm trying to remind myself when I'm to be patient with it is that I know that this is my favorite part of the process when I look back, like with A Place for Us, when I finished it and you're working on the line edits. It's rewarding, but it's very different than this. And then, like, the part of where you're promoting the book, that's a completely different thing and maybe is my least favorite. So I'm trying to tell myself to like really enjoy the uncomfortable unknown with this like
Wow.
right now.
But
Mm.
there must be like a nice experience, a freeing experience for having people read your book, and especially your family. I don't think to be a writer is a very encouraged occupation in the South Asian community, and to finally have it done, and then everyone's congratulating you and saying good things, and there's like a level of respect that comes with that. That must be ultimate freeing. I wonder if were your parents supportive of your writing when you were young?
They really were in that they were supportive of it, but they didn't think that it was going to be like a actual path.
So like
That
they were supportive as a hobby, but not as
yes,
a full-time job.
completely. And I don't blame them in that. Like there's so many kind of it's just a hard path. And also like, when I was growing up, there was no one that I had seen personally who had walked that path, no one who I had access to even that looked like me or like was writing about characters like I wanted to write about that gave me an idea of what. So when I was really little, I would write tons of stories, but they would all be about white kids and their relationship to their dogs. Like this is
Yeah,
when I was like, 8 or 9. I would always write
right.
stories about these young girls and their dog gets lost and they're like looking for their dog. And it's so crazy because not only was I not a white girl, but also I had no experience with dogs at all. Like in my family, like everyone's afraid of dogs.
Dogs
They're
are haram.
Dogs are haram, right? Or najis or something.
That's
Which
just, yeah, my
najis,
bad.
yeah. Which honestly, like I now have dogs in my life. I mean, I don't have a dog, but yeah. So, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like I had such a skewed idea of who gets to have stories told about them, what those stories can be, that
Hmm.
like I didn't really think it was a path for me. And I remember my dad would do these things like he would get me a lot of journals that I would fill when he went on travels and stuff. And my mom was very encouraging and things like that. But when it came time to kind of go to college and choose your major, um, it was much more expected that I would do something like pre-med.
Do you remember the exact moment when your characters went from names like Veronica and John to like Hussein, Ali?
Yes. Yes. And it was actually, I think A Place for Us was the first time that happened. I'm trying to remember if that's correct, and it is. I was also really young when I started A Place for Us. I was 18, and I think the first name that I wrote down was when I gave a character name, it was Hadia's name.
Right.
And I remember that moment of stopping and being like, what? Like, I can't do this. Like, can I write that? Like, can I write about a woman named Hadia? Like, what does that mean? And then, it started to become what it started to become.
Not only is her name Hadia, but she's the character that is representative of what your parents and your parents want your
Mm,
daughter to be in that
yeah.
sense, obedient, perfect,
Yes.
religious, and academically successful.
Yes, totally. I've been thinking about archetypes, not in a very serious way. I want to get more into it in a kind of serious way, like studying it. But I've been thinking about that recently and hearing you say that Hadia is the archetype of like what the good Muslim girl should be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
She's the girl everyone hates because she's perfect.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And yet she's not, right? So that I guess it's like now looking back, it is a story of what the good Muslim girl should be, and also how being that kind of crushes her,
Yeah.
you
And
know?
others around her.
Yes. Yeah.
Before I guess we're getting too deep into this book, so we should maybe take a moment and can you give us a introduction to the book, A Place for
Oh, a
Us?
place for us. Sure. It's been a long time since I've done that. But A Place for Us is a novel that's told in multiple perspectives. It's about a family, a young Muslim family. The parents are immigrants from India, and it's about the how that family fractures. And it fractures when their youngest son, and only son in the family, Amar, runs away. And the book is kind of begins at Hadia's wedding after he's run away, but he's come home to attend this wedding. And it's kind
Hmm.
of a mystery, and all the characters are trying to figure out what was my part in this? What was my part in my family's fracturing? What were the decisions I made? What were the things that I could have said and I didn't? And it really becomes about that, kind of figuring out why he left, so that when you go back to the wedding towards the middle end, um, it becomes about like, well, now what's going to happen?
I've spoken to writers who have an outline, they have a plan where the story's gonna go, like
Mm,
an ending at least.
mm.
And there are writers who I think just have an image in their head and then they just kind of trust the gods of writing and just go and follow the characters wherever they go. Which style do you think you're more like?
I don't outline.
You don't outline, so you're just going with the flow.
Mm-hmm. It's really it's like it's like working in the dark. It's like you're in a dark room and you're kind of touching things until you figure out where things are, and only at the end can you turn a light on, right? And then you see what you've done. I don't outline. I think you can kind of tell that when you're reading A Place for Us, because part two is so scattered. Um, I would have definitely done it differently had I worked on it now, like the writer I am now, maybe. But I had to do that to get here, right? But yeah, so I don't outline, I kind of write out, and I really follow the characters, and I try to figure out what's the character's voice, what are the key scenes that they're turning over in their mind. I try to figure out like a question that's going to frame what I then go and write.
Hmm.
Um, like for A Place for Us, the question would be the one I mentioned a little bit earlier, like what's my part in my family's fracturing, right? And so then the scenes that come up are kind of answering that. So yeah, I work in that way, and then only later do I start to see what's happening, see what needs to be cut and things like that.
I mean, you describe it as like going into a dark room and looking for the light, but this is like going into like the most gigantic hallway and then
Yes.
trying to find the light. Like and you might as well just stop and turn back because it's like you have no idea how long this corridor is. So what gave you that kind of courage to push forward? Because I think you started this at 18, so this is an age where like everyone's trying to figure out what are you doing for a living, where are you
Yeah.
going? Your parents are probably pressuring you, society's pressuring you to get married.
Mm.
So, and here you are sitting in a library or a coffee store or your room and just kind of
Yeah.
writing words. So what gives you that hope and not hope,
I don't
faith?
know if it's courage. Like, sometimes it's also just like pure delusion. You know what I mean? That kind of
Yeah.
luckily ends up coming together. But also it was really like I really it's almost obsessive. It's like something I'm doing for myself and something I'm doing for these characters. Like I have to write for myself to be sane, to
Hmm.
figure this out. And I have to make sure that I'm doing in a way that is really servicing these characters, that I want to do right by them and I want to do right by their story. At least that's what it was for me with my first book. I had a sense that I really loved them, and I really um they felt like my little cubs, you know what I mean? And I had to help them be. So that was the kind of feeling. And I remember I would feel terror as I'd be working on it. Like, what if I wake up one day and I don't want to do this anymore? Like, what if that leaves me, this kind of urgency in me to do it? And luckily that didn't happen. And yeah.
What's very special about this novel is it's not just about a Muslim family in America. It's about a Shia Muslim
Mhm.
family in America. That's a minority in a minority.
Yes.
And I think even the majority of Muslims wouldn't really grasp the references mentioned in the book. Muharram, Ashura,
Mhm.
Imam Ali on your forehead.
Mhm.
Those are very cultural aspects of Shia Islam. And I wanted to know when you're writing this, you could have left it out, I guess.
Mhm.
Or I wonder, were you taking extra special care to kind of explain this to a audience that needed to understand this to follow the plot? Or did
Mm.
you feel like, you know what, they can just Google it, figure it out, or you don't even need to know, you just continue on. So how did you balance like, okay, you need to understand the culture, the religion, if you want to if you keep moving forward?
I think that what I had tried to do is that I included what was important to the character and what they were observing. And I mean, I haven't read my book again.
Really?
Yeah, I haven't read it again, and it's been years. And I don't think because I haven't done events, so I have, when you're doing an event, you'll have to like choose a section to read. So then
Yeah.
year after it's out, you kind of have to still be opening it and choosing things. But I haven't done any events for so long. So it's like I really don't remember what I wrote. But when I remember when I was working on it, my intention was that I wouldn't explain anything because the characters know. So why explain? Like
Hmm.
you mentioned the Imam Ali thing on the forehead. Like, I explain enough to show what's happening and who's doing it
Yeah.
and what they're doing, but I'm not like turning to the audience and saying like, this is the first Imam and it's done in a way that it's like a thing that South Asians sometimes do in cultural, da, da, da,
Right.
you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
the audience to me is not there. To me, it's these characters who are telling their story for themselves. They're trying to understand something for themselves. So I don't think I tried to explain things. That being said, I did make some decisions that I wouldn't now make as a
Like
writer
what?
now. Yeah, like for example, I italicize words that are in Urdu.
That seems like a normal thing to do.
Yeah, it does. And yet, as I've been thinking about it, I've been thinking my characters wouldn't do that because to them, the Urdu English it doesn't stand out. You flip in and out of it. Only when you're communicating yourself to somebody who doesn't know Urdu or who doesn't know English are you having to do that work. But the if I were to chart their consciousness as accurately as it occurs to them, it wouldn't be in italics. So that's one thought that
Wow.
I had.
That's a
And one thing,
very, very precise detail.
yeah, so that's one thing I'm thinking of now, like things I would have done differently as a slightly older writer, maybe, you know.
Characterization is really deeply rooted in this story, and religion plays a big part in all these characters. And I don't know what your relationship with religion growing up or even now, but it must be really difficult to write characters struggling with religion and not having to project your own
Mm,
relationship into these characters. And also you have this kind of responsibility where you don't want to make it look bad, but at the same time, you don't want to, try to make it look good. Like you want to be honest, I guess. I mean, I understand the Shia community is very sensitive. I mean, any minority community is very sensitive when discussing about their culture and their religion.
mhm.
So I wanted to know, was there a lot of pressure to write about Shia characters? And I wanted to know what the reception was with your own Shia community you grew up with back home.
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't feel any pressure to write about Shias or Muslims or anything like that. This was just the characters that came to me and the ones that I was interested in writing about and um, then became devoted to writing about. I didn't feel it is a hard one to navigate in that how can you write about a community that is not only a minority, as you're saying, but is also marginalized, is also,
Yeah.
there's so much around it. There's so much baggage around it. And how do you navigate that? So that is a hard one to navigate, and I'm navigating it a little bit now as well. And I'm trying to answer that. Um, I think the answer to all of these big questions is always with the character, you know? what is my character perceiving? What is my character believing? And how can I make myself just a vessel that is channeling them? So even if I have my own views, what are their views? And how can I honor that, you know? And one
Mm-hmm.
thing that was really interesting to me as I was writing about faith as it exists in this family through these different perspectives is that they all have such a different experience to faith, you know? Like Rafiq's is so different than Layla's, and Layla's is so different than Hadia's. And then weirdly, everyone is thinking that Amar's is the one that's the most problematic or estranged or something like that. And yet he's the one who really has in his consciousness absorbed the stories and has thought about them. Whereas Hadia is maybe thinking like, what's the right thing and what's the wrong thing? And he's just thinking. So it's that was an interesting um realization for me, discovery for me as I was writing, you know, and then it really doesn't become about me and what do I think about things. It's like, okay, who are they and how can I bring that out?
Right. Do you know, I don't know if you're gonna answer this question, but do you know what happens to the characters after the book's over? At least Amar.
Sometimes I start to know and then I don't want to know.
All right, fine.
You know,
But
like
I'm sure
sometimes
people have asked you, like, what
yeah, yeah,
happens to
yeah.
them?
Sometimes I've started to think things or but then I don't want to go there. You know, I knew when I was writing this that I would not want to write a sequel.
All right. I
You
mean,
know,
it's not really a sequel. It's just
yes. No, no, no.
you
Yeah.
left it so like,
Yeah. Yeah. But it's
suspense.
interesting what you're saying about the Shiaism thing. You know, I really think that uh my family Shia, I'm Shia. I really think that had such a huge impact on me as a writer, actually, which is
Yeah.
really which I didn't know until later. And I think it even has an impact in some decisions I made with the novel. Like, for example, the novel is told through different perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the novel is tunneled around one moment through these different perspectives. And you know, when you're I don't know how familiar you are with
I'm
Shiaism.
Shia. I'm Shia.
Oh, you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
know.
that's one of the funny things about you know, being Shia. You know, one of the nice things about it is that when you meet another Shia person, it's like you meet somebody who's like a member to this club or something.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
God, yes, okay, there's so
We
much
can we if this was not a podcast, we could literally spend hours
hours.
ranting and complaining and venting about things
Yeah,
and just
totally.
asking each other how you feel. Do you really, it's like
Yes.
a secret club. Yeah.
It's a secret club and it's like kind of, you know, it's kind of amazing feeling, you know, um when that happens. Like one quick story. It was the pandemic and I was going into the store to buy masks and the pandemic had just started. And everywhere they were sold out and like hand wash was sold out and everything was going for like a crazy price. Like people were starting to sell like a tiny canister of hand wash for like, you know, not hand wash, sorry. What was hand sanitizer?
Sanitizer.
Yes, for like, you know, a crazy amount for this tiny little pouch. And I got there and I was like talking to people who are owning the pharmacy behind the till and they're like it's like it's that moment of they're like I'm like, where are you guys from? And they're like, we're from Najaf. And I was like, okay, cool, I've been to Najaf. And they're like, why have you been to Najaf? And I was like, you're that there's that moment, you know what I mean? And it's
Yeah.
like, oh, I'm Shia. And they're like, oh, where's Shia? And then they're like, take it all for free. And I'm like, no way, this is a lot of money. Like, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah. Yeah.
this funny, lovely exchange. But anyways, back to the way it's affected my storytelling. Um the way that it's affected my storytelling, I realized only in retrospect is that, you know, as you know, Ashura is a huge part of the culture and the faith.
Huge.
Huge. And the way that it's structured for people who don't know, it's about Ashura is basically commemorates the martyrdom of the Prophet's grandson,
Yeah.
Hussein, who and what's really interesting is that for the 10 days leading up to Ashura, you kind of break the story of Ashura down through the different people's perspectives. Really moving and it's really theatrical and it is storytelling. You know what I mean? That's what it is. And every night there's this atmosphere of telling it through a different perspective as you go towards this moment. And everybody who's there has heard it since they were babies. I mean, and
Right.
yet everyone's there again, gathered and listening again.
And
And there's
crying.
and trying, and there's such a kind of, and it's told in the present tense. And that is one, at a certain point when I was writing A Place for Us, I realized how much growing up in a Shia tradition had affected the way the choices I'm making as a storyteller, in that it's told in the present tense. There's this kind of immediacy, that this is happening, and that this is the moment that you're in, and it's told through these different perspectives, and you're all tunneling towards this one moment. And I don't think I would have made those same choices had I not, as a kid, been exposed to that kind of storytelling from a really young age.
I never realized this until you say it now.
What I mean by that is, when the Urdu masayibs are happening,
Yeah.
pay attention to how the orator's doing it. They are never saying like this happened and this happened. They're saying it in the present tense. And it achieves this effect in the audience of feeling like this is happening right now. Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
As a Shia person, what was it like to read it?
Felt like a nice hug. How did the Shia community, especially your own local Shia community that you grew up with, your friends, family, cousins, how did they receive the book?
You kind of would have to ask them, right? I mean, because I don't know. Like from what I do know, I was really moved by how much people supported it.
Hmm.
And I was moved that I was really afraid before. I wasn't sure how people would react. Um, and I think that one thing that was really, well, for example, my grandma read it, and
Wow.
yeah, she's so, she's elderly lady. And I remember the first few pages in, I mentioned Hadith Kisa.
Hmm.
And she was like so happy and surprised and shocked. And she was just like, oh my God, you put Hadith Kisa in there. You know what I mean? Well, that's what they're reciting. So that's in there. And that was actually a really moving moment for me, because she studied English in Hyderabad as a young woman. And that was one of the things that she studied. And she would always talk about like the books that they would be assigned is like Jane Austen would be assigned a lot,
Yeah.
things like that. And so her idea of like what is a book, you know what I mean, is very different than what she read, which is closer to her life in a way. Kind of moved to see her having that experience. But yeah.
That's very profound.
Yeah. I was happy because she was, she's lived a really long life. And that was maybe the first time that she experienced that.
You've been back to Hyderabad, right?
Yeah.
How was that? When was the last time you went?
A few years ago, I went, I did the Times Lit Festival in Mumbai with the book. And so I stopped off in Hyderabad, and I really love it. I mean, I wish I grew up spending more time there. I uh, I mean, India is changing now. But
There's
I
a big Shia community in Hyderabad. I think it's like one of
yeah,
the biggest communities in the subcontinent.
totally. And there's all these like really interesting, I think, traditions specific to Shiism there. I don't know if they're still happening or if they historically happened, but the procession with Bibi Ka Alam and things like that.
Yeah.
There's this walk up Molaka Pahar where there was some kind of miracle that had happened at some point, and people walk up there, and yeah, so there's some
It's like a
nice.
hill.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, what are you working on next now?
What am I working on? I am working on,
You've got a newsletter
yes, I'm
that's
working on
growing.
yes, I have a newsletter on Substack. It's called First Draft. Um, we can talk about that in a minute. I'm working on a novel. No, after my first one, I started a novel that I've actually shelved. Um, I
You
was
gave
like,
up. You just like this is
yeah,
not going anywhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I was like, actually, I got a lot of pages into it, and I had these characters and I had this voice, and there was something in me that said, oh, I'm writing a novel that I think I should write. And I don't want to do that. I want to write the novel that I want to write. I want to write the novel that I'm terrified to write. I want to go to like if I were to have written this other novel that I started, and um it was about intergenerational stuff, and it was about it was kind of like more historical and things like that. And I've really shelved it. And maybe my Substack will be a place where I can like because it's never going to see the light of day. I've given up on it, but I wrote it for many years. And so maybe that'll be a place where I can share little pieces of what it could have been because
Right.
there's some stuff in there that I really loved working on. But that was a huge shift for me as an artist to think like, oh, I don't want to spend years of my life doing what I think I should do. I want to do what I'm freaking terrified to do and try and make that happen and what I think is so fun to do. And so I'm obviously I started this other novel and I'm working on it now. It's been almost 3.5, 4 years. And
Wow.
it's been I'm probably years away from finishing it. And so I don't want to talk about it yet.
Not even a hint or a clue or an idea. A love story, a family drama. Is it about Shia Muslim Americans? Is it about an immigrant story? I don't know. Anything like
Um,
that or nothing?
I can say that the main character is from a Shia family. Yeah,
All right.
Shia
Okay.
background. She's Shia. What else can I say? No, I can't say anymore.
Fine.
But I am really excited about it. I can say that.
What is your writing process like? You sit in front of a laptop every morning and you write?
I mean, it's changed so much now that I've become a mom.
Right.
Changed so much. Before, it would be like I sit down, I write somewhere, and then I have, until I stop, like until like my eyes are blurry and like, and then you eat something, you go home, you work again until nighttime. Like I had this kind of um
Grit.
unhealthy work ethic, maybe.
Okay.
But luckily I'm trying to have a much more balanced approach to my life now, and I'm trying to write when I can. Um, you know, for the past few months, it's been trying to find pockets where I'm writing when, um, my kid is sleeping and things like that. And so I'm just trying to figure that out. It's hard though, because novels really require hours of deep time and deep thinking. And so I'm trying to navigate with what I think a lot of women who work try have to navigate, which is like how to be a present parent and also how to be present in the work. And every day is a different answer. You're like suddenly like, oh my God, that schedule that was working for that I figured out that was working great for 3 months is suddenly not working because the nap time has changed. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Yeah. It's
So
a
just
it's a
trying
new
to
baby every 1 month. It's a new
exactly.
baby.
And it's yeah, so trying to figure that out. And I think my work will be better for it.
You think so?
I think it'll be better for it. And I think that it'll take more time.
Do you use a laptop or do you use like a pen and paper?
I write by hand. And then what I do is write when I write by hand about something that's like the novel, like here, for example, I put these two squares, right? And so
Yeah.
that's how I know that that's a novel section. So then I keep going by hand. And then when I don't know where to go anymore, I'm like, I actually don't know what to free write now. I then say, okay, now it's time to start transcribing. And the transcribing process can kind of open up. Oh, yeah, I have to write this too. So then I'll be transcribing like these pages. And once I've transcribed it, I click that box, like I'll exit. So I know that I've transcribed that part.
When you say
Um,
transcribed, what do you mean by transcribed?
I type it up into into my laptop.
Okay, okay. So you write the rough draft of it on your you just go free flow on your journal and then
Yes.
you take what's good into your
So
laptop.
I transcribe all of it onto my laptop. Then
Everything.
everything.
And so I guess you're reading it as you write it.
Yes, so I'm reading it again and I'm
Yeah.
discovering it again. And sometimes I'm writing like, I'll be writing, and then I'll have like a parentheses like this feels awful, this sounds awful, and parentheses, and then I keep going. And then when I'm writing it, I'm like, you're right, Fatima, of whatever month that you wrote that is awful. Like let's cut this and move on. Or sometimes I'll be like, no, there was something there and I need to like keep working on it. So I transcribe everything, no matter how I felt about it at the time. And then that'll sometimes open up new things that I need to be free writing. And so I'll keep free writing. Free writing is the most important part of the process because that's where you're generating new material, right? And so
Right.
if I feel like I only transcribe when I don't know what to free write, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But if I'm like, you know what, I really don't know, then I start transcribing, and then hopefully it opens up things that I need to do, like generate again. And then if I still don't know after I've transcribed everything, then I go to like a printing place. I print it out and I have like a bunch of pages that are completely rough drafts, sketches of scenes or full scenes or notes of what I want to accomplish and things like that. And then I go read it through with a pen in hand. And that will usually tell me that I need to generate more things. And if once I finish that process where I'm like, you know what, now it's about the sculpting, then
Right.
I have my all the pages that I've written into, and I've I've written into them like, either new sentences or whatever. And then I open up a completely new document and I slowly, or do it on the journal, and I slowly begin everything from the very beginning.
But then you must be constantly, even you're at a party, you're watching a movie, your head is constantly in that story, trying to just think about it, I guess,
It used to be.
for
It
the day.
used to be that, and now I have to be so present. One thing that a kid demands is like total presence.
Total presence. Yeah.
Before, you could be totally like, you're driving somewhere, you're doing something, and that's all you're thinking about. But now you have to be like, oh, that doesn't look safe. Okay, managing this problem. Oh, here's a huge spill, like managing this problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're just present. So,
But
mhm.
when you were writing your first novel and you were 18 years old, how many years did it take you to actually see the full structure of the story? Like now we're getting somewhere. How long
Mm,
does that take you?
I don't know how long it took. I think about 5 years in, I had a first draft. And then it's sculpting, 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 editing, cutting, cutting, cutting.
My last question is, do you have any advice for young writers or who want to try to be where you are right now?
Hmm. I do have advice for young writers. I actually was writing a list of advice for young writers on my newsletter, and then I
Mm.
thought that it was a bit, I just decided not to publish it.
Right.
From that list, stuff I had written was stuff like um, that you have to know your intentions, that intentions are like a North Star, like you can return to them and keep coming back to them. That you have to, that fear is a really, like, it's just a part of the process. The fear is like the shadow to any kind of desire, right? And that you have to learn how to work with it and not let it stop you. Not asking for permission was another thing that I had written down. Um, I think especially the women shouldn't wait for permission. You should just do it.
Hmm.
Um, and what was the other advice? One thing that's huge is like, okay, if you want to be a writer specifically, read a lot. And also the importance of community, like creating a community, even if it's just your own friends who can like support you and you can champion them and their work and they can champion you and your work and together you can grow as an artist. That's what I would say.
Awesome. And do you want to plug in your newsletter? You kind of already
Oh,
talked about
sure.
it.
Yeah, what should I say about it? I'm really
It's great.
it's called First Draft. There's like different things that I want to do with it. Interviews with other artists and creatives on process. Um,
It's got book
maybe-
recommendations.
yeah, book recommendations, like kind of book club. The kind of book club idea I have is that I don't want it to be just like uh a book club where you discuss the book. I want to choose books that can help people write. Like I want it to be the way that I approach teaching in a class, like where a passage from a novel or a poem is like a jumping off point for students to like generate their own material and stuff. So like a book club that has writing prompts and things like that. Yeah, I have this idea of maybe writing something soon about the different tools that helped me when I was writing.
Yeah.
Um, some of the things that really had an impact on me, that I'll tell you now, and maybe I'll write it and maybe I won't, but like mantras really helped me.
Affirmations.
Affirmations, like creating one that is specific to the project you're working on. That really helped. So the Substack will feature random things like that.
You should post photos of your journal there and tell everybody how your process is really it's very very interesting and
Mm.
raw. I find it really interesting.
Yeah, I have ideas of like posting like things about like what's on the desk at any given point because I kind of find like what you put on your desk can help you work, you know?
Hmm.
Like certain quotes maybe or certain recently I've been working with this idea of images. Like what are images that are coming to me as I'm working on a certain scene or certain something, and then I get them and I print them out and I look at them while I'm working. And that's been an interesting part of the process.
Wow, very cool.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for talking.
No, thank you so much for being here. It's a really great book. I really loved it. Heartbreaking and but just very real. And I highly recommend anybody listening to read this book to check it out.
And also
And
thank you for the page that you do.
please, it's okay.
It's so informative. It's so I mean, to be honest, I'm not actually on Instagram anymore, but when I was on it, and I'm sure it's still this, it was like one of my favorite pages.
Thank you so much.
I learned so much from following it. So thank you.
I mean, thank you so much. It's an honor to have you here. Yeah, and that's it. Any questions?
No, thank you.
All right.